It's really important for us to be impartial and to be factual. There are times where what we see is really upsetting, but we can never lead with our emotion because that is not our job. We are not judge, we are not jury, we're not law enforcement, we're not a defense attorney or a prosecutor. It is up to someone else to drive those processes that decide, whether someone needs to be apprehended or arrested or, subsequently adjudicated. That's not our job. Our job is just to pull up the facts and hand them over.
From the haunted heartland in Omaha, Nebraska, my name is Brian Corey, and I welcome you all to this episode of the Necronomicast. My guest tonight for a late-night conversation is Roo Powell. She is the head of the nonprofit advocacy group SOSA and the frontrunner of the new television show Undercover Underage on Discovery Plus and Investigation Discovery. Undercover Underage follows her team in real time as they transform this 38-year-old mother of three into a teen persona and work to reveal the true identities of the online predators who reach out to her. Get the true story on how Roo and her team works to track down some of the internet's most dangerous child sex predators. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the real monsters. And now calling in on the Necronomicast hotline from New Haven, Connecticut, home of the world's best pizza, I'm told. I'm so excited to have Roo Powell on the show. Roo, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
I am excited to have you on the show for a number of reasons. I really admire your mission in putting the show and your nonprofit together. But I got to tell you, your show struck me because I have, much like you, I have three children, and my oldest daughter is of the age that you portray in your investigations. So when I was watching the show with my wife and my daughter watched some of them with us, it really struck home. So to have you on the program means a lot to me, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Now, this show, Undercover Underage, it's on Discovery Plus, streaming now, and it's also going to be on Investigation Discovery starting February 24th, 9 Eastern, 8 Central. And it's all about you and your crew and your nonprofit, SOSA, Safe from Online Sex Abuse. Why don't you tell me a little bit about SOSA?
Sure. So our overarching goal at SOSA is to prevent online sex abuse and exploitation. And we do that a number of ways. The main way that you've seen is through Undercover Underage. And that's where we put decoys online to identify perpetrators for law enforcement.
And with this, these guys that are hitting on younger girls, it's disturbing in a lot of ways. In many ways, these ACMs, as you call them, that stands for adults contacting minors. And the comparison is inevitable to the old TV show To Catch a Predator. And I know you've heard that before. And a lot of people watching or listening to this podcast will be familiar with Chris Hansen on that. But this is so much more. It's more of a natural progression as technology's gotten better, as technology's gotten more immersive and everything. As the technological sophistication has evolved, your investigative and methods to catch these ACMs, these adults contacting minors, has naturally progressed as well. And I'm really impressed with the technology and the investigative techniques that you and your crew have put together.
Thank you. Yeah, it is different. And, I remember watching To Catch a Predator when I was younger. It's different for a lot of reasons. One, that is a TV show. And what we're doing is what SOSA actually does. And we just so happen to have a camera come along, right? It's important to us that we do things right and we do it the right way. And we always want to help law enforcement and not be a hindrance. So we're very clear about us not being law enforcement. We're very clear about us partnering with them and kind of deferring to them in the way that they want to go about it. So you'll see in Undercover Underage that we collect evidence and that we hand it over to law enforcement. And they'll go one of three ways with that. One, they'll treat it as something we call a lead, and they'll do their own independent investigation. Or they might say, okay, great, give us the logins and we will now be the 15-year-old girl, or we will now be the 14-year-old girl. And then they'll take over communications, and we're happy to do that. And then sometimes, as you've also seen in the show, they just, they're working with us, or they ask us to continue to work with them. They ask me to continue to be the decoy. And so they're logged in the same time I am, and they're seeing the messages come in. And that's, the investigation goes from there.
How long were you doing this before you were approached to make this television show, before the cameras followed you around?
Well, a little convoluted in that I'm a career-long writer, and I've always cared a lot about advocacy. So I've written about the refugee crisis. I was in Southeast Asia writing about human trafficking, poverty, it kind of runs the gamut. And then I was running creative for a tech safety company. And my team, we were trying to demonstrate the ubiquity of online predation. So we thought, why don't we just put a fake teenager online just to demonstrate what happens? And you can't use a stock photo, and you can't use a real minor. So, I said, okay, listen, we'll take a photo and we'll just edit it down, because on my team, the creative team, we had a lot of designers. And so we did that and we put it online. It was a very rudimentary, just picture and let's go. In the first hour, 5 adult men had reached out to our minor. And we knew that, we knew what happened on the internet because we worked in that space. But we really had no idea what a minor's experience is like until we pretended to be a minor. And that was really shocking. So we continued to do that. I ended up writing a piece about it that went viral, because I think a lot of us parents just had no idea the extent of how this happens online. And then after that, I realized that this was really important to me, and I wasn't ready to kind of stop doing this aspect of my work. So I left that tech company, and the goal is to start SOSA. In the meantime, a production company reached out and said, hey, can we follow you around? And my knee-jerk reaction was, that feels weird. But they really sold it to me by saying, you reach so many people with the stuff that you've written. Imagine reaching even more people with a docuseries and, really spreading awareness that way, which is ultimately the goal, right? It's not to just catch bad guys one by one. It's to empower an entire society to combat online sex abuse and exploitation together.
And as a parent watching that show, I think I'm pretty good with technology, and my wife is too. But, watching this show and just seeing all the different ways that these ACMs, these adults that contact minors, all the different ways that they try and infiltrate into a child's life, it's pretty eye-opening. And you mentioned your team. You've got a really crack team. It's pretty amazing to watch you guys work together, bounce ideas off each other, get these hits from these guys in real time, and how you react and how you start investigating them and trying to determine what their identity is. How did you find and pick this team? Because it's not like, I talk to a lot of ghost hunters and things on the paranormal side of the show. And, they've got they have the equipment guy, they got the medium, they got the investigator, but this is a whole different ballgame with this investigation.
It is a little bit like that though, right? We've got one person that does this and one person that does that. They're all like the different versions of Captain Planet maybe. But, so I have known 2 of them for a really long time. I mean, I've known Kelly Becker for well over a decade. We've worked together before. I've worked with Shelby Chikazawa before. And so that felt like a really natural fit. And then I was introduced to Matt, who, is this wonderful photographer and editor. And, you do a lot of interviews, you do a lot of, you just want to make sure that you're working with the right people, if only for the reason that I am put in these super vulnerable situations and I need to feel safe around the people that are physically near me when I'm doing stuff where I feel super unsafe, like video chatting with perpetrators.
I was going to ask you now, especially starting in like episode 5, as people watch this, it really seems to take a toll on you emotionally. Just all these creepy guys hitting on you and girls and the things that they do, the things that they say. How does it feel to be filmed by a camera crew while having these uncomfortable interactions? I mean, you're doing your job, and these guys are doing what they're doing, and the camera crew is kind of filming it, getting your reaction, but also documenting what's going on. It's got to be so uncomfortable for you.
It is uncomfortable because it's really like you're inviting people to watch you get abused in some way, or watch you be degraded, or watch you be objectified. And it's terrible enough to experience that one-on-one, but then to kind of invite people around you to see that in real time is certainly awkward. I just keep reminding myself what the score is, right? And it's better me than an actual teenage girl who doesn't have access to the things that I have access to. I'm an adult with reasonable coping skills. I have a therapist. I, have people around me that can support me. When you're a teenager and you're being targeted and you are scared and you feel like, you could be shamed and ridiculed, that is a very lonely, isolating feeling. So every time I get upset, I'm not going to cry because that would be super weird. Every time I get upset or every time I feel bruised in some way, I have to remind myself that it's always better me than a kid.
Sure. When you do these things, this job for you is not like punch in, punch out, 9 to 5. I'm in the morning, out by supper time. Because a lot of these guys, they have lives, and they, whenever they have an opportunity to get on the phone, get on the computer and do what they do, you gotta have to be accessible at that time. So like, what is the work shift like? Do you work overnights? I mean, how do you, and without getting too like emotionally drained, I mean, you got to space time off. Do you like do a couple days on, a couple days off? What's your schedule like?
We really can't do a couple days on, a couple days off, because then you have to kind of make a reason why a teenage girl would be completely offline and not have access to her phone for a couple of days. So when we decide to do this, we are in it to win it. We're really dialed in. And I know that I can't really take a day off, and I can't take 2 days off because your average teenager doesn't do that. So we kind of, we make ourselves available the hours that you expect a teenage girl to be available. So maybe she's in chemistry at 10 a.m., but she should be out of school by 2:30 unless she has, some sort of extracurricular. And we really bake those in. But a lot of times our shifts are from 3 p.m. to 1 a.m. It really depends if it's a weeknight versus a weekend. And, that house that you see in Undercover Underage, I definitely ended up just sleeping there a few times, which it also feels like a little weird, like, you're going to stay in the house of horrors overnight. But, you have to. And so it does get draining. Now, that's why we don't do this year round. I am not a decoy 365 days out of the year because it is just simply not tenable. One, it's super expensive to run these ops. And two, just for mental health alone, it's just not tenable or feasible. Even if you're not the decoy and you're not the one doing the interactions, but you're there watching all this happen and you're helping and you're putting together evidence. The people that do evidence, the people that do evidence support for us, they need those breaks too, because it's just so heavy and it's just a lot. And we want to be in it long term. So we need to bake in serious breaks.
Another reason that this kind of hit home for me, when I was in college, I had a professor that was like a mentor to me. Very popular individual, very talented, did his job exceptionally well, and lots of awards, lots of accolades, just a great reputation. Then in the year 2000, he was arrested for this crime. And this was kind of like in the infancy of people starting to get picked up for this. You know what I mean? In the year 2000, I was working at a hotel during the summer, and a buddy called me and he's like, "Hey, Brian, did you hear who got arrested today?" I'm like, "No, I assume it's one of our friends." He's like, and when he told me who, I immediately thought DUI or something like that. And when the words came out, solicitation of a minor online, I understood those words, but back in 2000, it was kind of a new a new thing. And I'm just struck by, on your show, how many of these men are similar, career path men, very successful. This isn't the guy in the overcoat exposing themselves like, that kind of a stereotypical trope. A lot of times these are very successful, powerful men, or, college educated. Are you ever surprised, or is that kind of the shock of that kind of stuff worn off? The shock of what kind of men sink down to this level?
I think it's worn off for me, but, to your point, we all kind of have this idea of what a perpetrator might be, a perpetrator of child abuse, and we automatically assume it's some sort of monster, a caricature, someone that we've seen portrayed on NCIS. When in reality, they're, maybe well-educated career men, they're family men, they have a wife and kids, sometimes they're conventionally attractive. I remember when it was, a younger guy, maybe 30, that had reached out to one of my decoys, and I have, the team that we work with sometimes, like the evidence collection team, the evidence support team, they're young, they're in their 20s, and they saw a picture of him and they said, "Oh my God, he looks like someone I would just swipe right on Tinder or Hinge or Bumble. Like, he just seems like a normal guy my age, and I would absolutely go out on a date with him." And for them, it was this shift, like, you mean to tell me that these normal guys that I'm around in everyday life might actually be a predator in some way? And so, we've seen people in the medical field, we've seen educators, like your professor. We've seen educators. We've seen, coaches, dads. We've had dads use their toddlers as like a way of trust building. Like, oh, maybe you could babysit my son sometime. And really, I think people don't understand that it's not like, sometimes they're white collar, sometimes they're they work a 9 to 5, they go home, they have dinner with their families, they help kids with homework. And then at night they go online and they look for a minor to abuse. And so, yeah, like when it's a respected member of society, when it's, a selectman, in town, or a mayor or a teacher, or, the list kind of runs the gamut. I think people are genuinely shocked. Like, oh, but he's married with a beautiful family and he has daughters the same age as the decoy. And like, it for them, and even for me still, but it's so shocking. It's really hard to get your head around.
Yeah, this particular individual, he used his position at the university, with recruiting and things like that, to get information on girls. And I guess the story goes that the girls' parents intercepted the emails, called the state patrol, who also got in touch with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They took over that girl's email account. And when they arrested him, they had correspondence between them. He was asking about what size bra and panty and all that kind of stuff. And they arrested him with all that stuff that was detailed in the email on his person. And, he had to, obviously he lost his career. 5 years of probation because he never committed a crime before or since, So, I mean, it's just amazing how 20 some odd years later, this is still, it's still a thing. I know that sounds weird for me to say, but I mean, people aren't getting the word out. And that's what's good about your show. Like, there's more of this coming out. The Chris Hansen thing after time kind of became kind of a running joke, why don't you have a seat kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that there's these shows that are still showing that this is a problem, and it's even getting worse and more sophisticated with burner accounts and people with burner phones and changing accounts all the time so they evade law enforcement. It's so compelling to watch your show. I was watching it with my wife. In one episode in particular, you kind of use your mama bear voice and you cuss this guy out that you caught.
Yes. I begged them to not include that scene. They're like, no, it's so good.
That's great television. It's great television. and for the people that haven't seen it yet, I'm not even going to say what number episode it is so they can tune in and see it, because it is compelling television, because it's so real. Your reaction, you just kind of
Oh, I mean, I totally broke character, and and then it became and then I was scolding him like he was a child, which he very much deserved. But yes, it was such a string of profanity that anytime it's referenced, it's all bleeped out.
Right.
And so my daughter, the trailer went around her school, and she's like, "Look, my mom curses in it a lot, but she's bleeped out." And, like, thanks a lot, kid. But yeah, that was a moment where, what you don't see in that, what you don't see in that scene, and I'm giving a little bit away here, is that he had sent me CSAM, which is child sex abuse material, also known as child porn. And what he was trying to do was coerce what he thought to be a teenage girl to send nude photos. And the way that he did that was by sending photos of other exploited children, saying, "Look, all of my girls do this in exchange for money. All you have to do is do this and I'll give you money." And that's when I got on this video call with him. And, I was able to kind of ascertain that things were not the way that he said they were. And it involved a lot of fun stuff that we weren't able to show, but, he claimed to be in the US, and I saw a Manchester United flag in the back, and the time zone was off. And then you see an outlet, and it's not the same outlet that we use in the US.
Right.
And so there were a bunch of clues, and I went, all right, and that's when it was another photo, and I lost it. So
yeah, Mama Bear for sure. My wife, she admired your strength in a lot of these situations because she would not be able to restrain herself. She lasted about 2 minutes with some of these guys. And you poor thing, you sit there, getting information, getting evidence, it's really interesting how you're trying to get little bits and pieces about his occupation, what town he lives in, what restaurants he frequents, just to kind of whittle away, trying to get to his identity. And that takes time.
Mm.
And you're sitting there, and then, they decide to do what they want to do in front of you.
Yeah.
She'd last about 2 minutes doing this, as we all would. So your tenacity and your commitment to helping these young people it's to be commended. It really is. It's a public service as well as compelling television.
Thank you so much.
I got to ask you, how long do you think you could do something like this? Like mentally, or do you ever see yourself like kind of stepping back and training?
I thought you said, so you're going to age out real soon, right?
No, I don't. No. I don't mean it like that at all. I mean, like, how long do you think that you could sit there and watch these individuals do what they do and act the way they act? And you know what I mean? I mean, it's not an acting gig that you have. It's not,
No.
This is really hard undercover work for real.
I think at this point, I would like to joke and say that my cold hard heart is, it's a tundra now, so I can handle it.
Right. You've seen it all.
But realistically, like, let's say everything stopped right now and there were no more shows and there was no more SOSA. And it was like, Roo, you can't do this anymore. You can only go, I don't know, you can only knit for the rest of your life. You can only make sweaters. That would suck. I would not like that. But the effect that this docuseries has had, and what we've seen with the docuseries, what we've seen with SOSA, the amount of emails and messages and DMs that I get daily about people who just, like, they dealt with this and all of a sudden they realized it wasn't their fault, that they were manipulated, and it's become so healing for them. Or people who said, wait a minute, I saw my kid on that website and my kid's been acting weird. And so I talked to my kid and it turns out it was a perpetrator. So we did call 911. And there's been so much, I believe, like, and I hate to sound self-important here, but there's so much good that has come out of the docuseries already, and has come out of SOSA's work already, and just raising awareness already, that if I had to retire in this moment right now and only knit sweaters, I would feel good about what we've done. And I would feel like we've done a lot. That said, I want to keep doing this. And the way that SOSA works is more than just, me pretending to be a decoy. So, I talk with high schools. I talk with teens one-on-one. I do education with parents, caregivers, teachers. We also there's like this element of tech with it, right? So we partner with a tech company called Spectrum, and we take all of our conversations and we identify patterns in the language, in grooming, really. Like, here's a technique that's used, here's the pattern of language, here's a technique that's used here, and another pattern of language. And we give it to these data scientists who use it to help train artificial intelligence to better detect signs of child abuse. And that's on a lot of these different websites and platforms that now realize that the onus is kind of on them to keep their user base safe. So your social media apps, your dating apps, your gaming apps, your coloring book apps, they're understanding that now. And so we're helping to teach this machine to better detect signs of child abuse with all of the information we're giving them. So that's another part of it. I will be screaming about grooming statutes until I'm 80. And I want the age of consent to be raised from 16 to 18. So that's something that we're pursuing as well. And we're talking with, legislators about this. My take is that if the arbitrary age that someone becomes an adult is 18, that's when they can vote, that's when they can go to college, that's when they do, X, Y, Z. Then that also should be the age that someone can give consent to be in a relationship with a 70-year-old or what have you. So there's a lot of things that I can do that aren't necessarily talking to the bad guys, but I still think I have that in me too.
Well, that's a really important part of the job too. With these algorithms and everything that you're helping identify, there's got to be, in your opinion, I'm sure, much more done to stop the spread of child pornography through these platforms and through people's phones and how it's sent. I know it's very sophisticated how a lot of these predators encrypt things and send it out, but of course, there's got to be more that the companies, these tech companies, can do to identify it and weed it out and stop it.
There's some technology around age recognition. Like, what's the difference between a 19-year-old consensually sending a nude and someone sending a photo of an exploited child? Well, they try to, there's attempts for age recognition to happen with that. It's difficult. If you think about it, child porn is very different than it was, say, 30 years ago. You had to actually get photos developed. You had to take a VHS tape and hand it off to someone else. You had to put something physical in the mail and it could be intercepted by police. And so that was not a lucrative, a lucrative trade because it was so easy to get caught. And now with the internet, I think the Child Rescue Coalition references the most downloaded piece of child sex abuse material is on like 2.5 million individual IP addresses. It's a lot. And so I think that, if these companies can be more proactive about the people that they let on their websites and their platforms and the things that they do, that's going to make a difference in the long run.
Wow. Earlier, I asked you, if you were surprised by any of these ACMs, these adults that contact minors. Did you ever, or do you ever have females, or is it mostly men that contact young ladies?
So it's a two-part answer. Mm-hmm. A child can be targeted regardless of age, sexual orientation, gender identity. So, sorry, I didn't mean age, I meant gender. Mm-hmm. So let's say a 15-year-old, some might say, oh, even my heterosexual teenage son. And yes, even your heterosexual teenage son. And that might not be as straightforward, and there might be a lot more extortion involved, but kids are contacted regardless of gender, regardless of sexual orientation. Now, the people that are doing this are almost always men. And this is something that I've never actually spoken with a woman. I've spoken with men pretending to be women, certainly. Mm-hmm. And, the law enforcement I've talked to has also said, yeah, that's kind of a unicorn. Women are maybe more involved in sex trafficking, right? Like whether it's a mama-san or like some sort of, mother hen type figure, or as you've seen in the news lately, like it's just a little bit different. It's not necessarily a woman going on looking to prey on a minor. So yes, I would say, unfortunately, and I apologize for sounding like I hate all men, but it is men.
A lot of us are pigs, that's for sure. I was watching this, and there's it must have been a whirlwind year for you, because it seems like these shows were filmed early 2021. Is that fair to say? Is that right?
Yeah. So we filmed the beginning, like the first half of last year, and then the first half of 2021, and then the show aired November 2021. So it was a really weird year, and plus also in the middle of a pandemic. So yeah, 2021 was a lot.
So, watching these, you're filming, you're doing all this investigation, people are filming you, and then they go and edit the show, and then it's marketed and it's put out. I'm just wondering, I mean, it's a lot of these things that you filmed aren't even a year old. And I'm just wondering if you'll ever offer any kind of update, because on updates about what happens to some of these men that you do find their identity, and you do find out where they are and who they are. And I'd like to see some resolution to some of these guys. You know what I mean? Like Mitch, the white knight, the guy that was grooming that way, and like the accountant, and just all these weird characters, that I'm bringing up that people will discover and be
the candy man, the teacher. Yes. All of it. Yes.
We name these guys, and it's revolting. A lot of these, these predicaments that you've thrown yourself into, or that you find yourself into. And I just wondered if there's any kind of resolution that you're able to report on in the future.
I think in the future, ultimately, some of the arrests that you've seen are still pending trial. There was one sentencing that happened that you saw. And so that ACM is serving time. The truth is, when law enforcement gives lead to another agency or another department, it's not like they all give each other the head. Like, there's no status report on each person necessarily. Like, hey, that guy that I sent you, last May, anything happened with him? Oh, well, I actually handed it over to someone else here. And so we don't ever want to be a strain on law enforcement. So we never poke and say, what happened? What happened next? Sometimes we don't know that an arrest has been made until we read it in the news. Truthfully, unless it's like a case where I am on the hook for testifying, then sometimes we really don't know. That said, I share your frustrations. And a lot of times, it really isn't, what I don't want to do is denigrate law enforcement, because it's not them. A lot of it is just, does a prosecutor want to do this? Or what are the rules like? What are the laws like in that state? Illinois has a grooming statute. Texas, they're super aggressive about their prison terms for someone who has, committed some sort of a crime against children. Other places, it's like probation, or it's, it just varies so much that there are states that are, I know that there will be closure. I know there will be resolution. And there are some states that, there's just, nobody can see. I'm throwing my hands up in the air, and that is a bummer. But sometimes the wheels of justice turn very, very slowly. If there's a season 2, like if there's a decision to make a season 2, I'm sure there will be updates. But for now, I have to keep them in my heart.
Sure. That's one of my questions was going to be, how has the reception been from law enforcement and with your collaboration? Has it been pretty positive? Or, I hate to think of law enforcement nowadays as being like an old boy network where, well, we don't need anybody's help, or do they welcome what you're doing and take it with open arms? And
I would say it's a case by case basis. For the most part, when people understand what we're doing, they get it. So, for example, there are times that law enforcement will say, thank you so much. You actually completed 90% of the case for us. And all we really needed to do was, show it to the prosecutor and make the arrest. Some places are just like, will not work with civilians at all. So no go. But I would say for the most part, the reception has been good. And I could see us the people that have appreciated the work, there are plans to continue to work with them and maybe go do ops in their cities. I mean, anytime we're in a city, we always get buy-in from local law enforcement. But as you know, ACMs aren't just geo-centered, right? They're all over the place. So if I have to call someone in Arizona or if I have to call someone in New Mexico, it's like, well, how do they feel about this? And sometimes it's just, hey, they're not going to do anything, but please take this and, maybe they can do their own investigation. But then it comes to, do they have the resources to do that? And a lot of these departments are just woefully under-resourced, or like huge, huge, huge cities that only have one person, one officer, or one detective devoted to internet crimes against children.
It was nice to see that you had that Detective Mark on your program as a consultant, and also as your Uber Lyft driver too.
My fake Uber driver. Yeah. The running joke is there are some times that I'm in the backseat and I look really somber and I look like I'm super pensive and I have my head in my hands. And honestly, most of the time it's because I was super car sick.
Oh, really?
So especially on those places where we had to do a tail, I'm not a I will never go on a roller coaster with you. Or Detective Mark Suda for that matter. But yeah, he was great. And I think people don't understand or they're not aware of like jurisdictions and what off-duty law enforcement can do. Or, if he's in another town, he can't just whip out a badge and make an arrest. And that's just not how it works. So there's some bureaucracy involved, right? I mean, and as there should be. This isn't the Wild West, and we want to go with the proper steps. It can be frustrating, of course.
Now, with him being a consultant and with the nature of what you're doing, did you have to verse yourself in a lot of the laws so there's no enticement going on? You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Or to anticipate like what a defense attorney might say, like, well, she was clearly leading, or you know what I mean?
Right. That's a great question. So before Suda joined us, I had worked with, there are a couple of cases that I did work with law enforcement, and they provided really like bright line rules. Like, okay, we can't do this, you can't do that. And to the point where anytime we work with law enforcement and they say, oh, here are our rules, we always go by the most conservative ones, because some say, yeah, sure, do this. Or some say, no, don't do that. And so we're as conservative as possible, to the point where it's sometimes comical, where, because we definitely don't want to mess it up. And certainly I do not want to put myself through all of that trauma and all of that awful stuff that I have to see and hear just to have someone say, this is no good. We can't do anything with this. So I just go by whatever law enforcement tells me, and maybe the strictest, and sometimes they have to consult with, a DA or someone to make sure that, we're keeping things on the up and up. But when we're at the point where we're working hand in hand with law enforcement, like you see in episode 2, with that one ACM, we're just constantly talking. It's just a constant sharing of information. I probably talk with that detective multiple times a day, every day, until, there was closure in that case. And so yes.
I was watching this show, and especially in one part, as the dad in me, now you're clear across half the distance of the country away from me, and I'm watching this months after it's been recorded and after you've done all these things. But as a dad, I was watching you on TV, and I was, even though we're similar age, and I felt so nervous for you in one particular episode when you were going after a fellow named Kevin, and you were trying to find him, seeing if he stopped into a bar, and you went into the bar, and you must have had a camera hidden in a purse or a coat pocket or something, but you like did a walkthrough. And I tell you, Roo, as I sit here and talking to you, I was like really nervous for you. I was like, oh my gosh. It was almost like horror movie, like, don't go in there. Don't. Don't
open that door. Yeah.
Right.
I had friends say, I see you now, and I know that you're okay, but I still get really upset watching the show. We did take a lot of safety precautions, and, I wasn't to the point where I started pushing back. Like, I'm an adult. I would go to a mall or a bar on my own anyway.
Right.
And then the argument would be, yeah, but you're pretending to be a 15-year-old and you can't, and people are dangerous. And so sometimes I fought a little bit, but ultimately there was always law enforcement and security with us.
Oof. Is there any experience like with a predator that has really stuck with you the most? Like, I just can't believe that person, not like personally, like you knew who they were, but just like, I just can't believe that guy, like this, and you find out who he is and you're like, good God, is anything really just stuck with you? Like,
yeah, I mean, so that you don't see on the show, but prior to it, I had been communicating with someone who ended up being a high school teacher, who also spoke about the other kids that he had close relationships with. And he was super manipulative and, just really, here are the cases that get me the most. When they're manipulative and they're abusive, but because there's no grooming statute in their state, it's not necessarily a crime. And this is a sad piece of information, but I've been a decoy for like a persona as young as 11. All right, and that's required lots of digital editing. But even at 11 or 12, an ACM would reach out to our decoy and ask for foot photos, right? Or photos in a swimsuit or in underwear for obviously self-gratification, right? Obviously awful purposes. So we get that information, get the ID, show it to law enforcement. And the response is, okay, what he did is super awful, super creepy, disgusting. It is not a crime to be disgusting. And that horrified me because he's clearly preying on a child. He's clearly being abusive. He's clearly causing damage. But because he hasn't crossed this other line where he hasn't flashed his genitals or he hasn't said he doesn't want to be a hands-on perpetrator, but he's still collecting images and just doing terrible stuff, it's not a crime and he gets to continue to do that. Which is why I am a staunch advocate for a grooming statute because, it is a shame. It is a shame that isn't illegal.
Are there other nonprofits like yours that are doing similar work in the United States that you're aware of? Or do you network with other groups like child advocacy groups like that? Do you compare notes on these dudes or anything like that?
We do. So not quite. I mean, there's it's mostly groups that are adjacent, right? Like they are doing image scanning, right? They're not necessarily putting decoys online. There are, I get a lot of flack from groups that, I call them, I hate to say this, but, vigilante groups, essentially, people that are not necessarily working with law enforcement. They're just like showing up somewhere with a camera in order to, public shaming,
Sure.
right? And I'm sure that is effective to an extent. That is not what we do at all. And so I've gotten a lot of criticism for us blurring their identities. So when an ACM is on this show, their identity, their face is blurred. And that's really important to us because I am not law enforcement. I'm not a judge. I'm not a jury. I'm not, a prosecutor. And so we really have to go by the law. And so I'm not going to put a person on blast just because I'm angry and because I understand the onus to do that, but we have to kind of go through the proper processes, even if those processes result in something that's not ideal, which that also does suck. So there are lots of groups out there that do similar in that they're putting decoys online and maybe they're like using a camera but I would say it's maybe, I haven't found a nonprofit. I found groups, but not a nonprofit that does what we do.
Yeah, I wouldn't really encourage that if anybody's so inclined out there in listening land to do something like that, because you don't want to hamper these investigations and tip these guys off and do things in a way that are going to like I said, hamper an investigation. You don't want to do anything you want these guys to be found. You want them to be found and prosecuted in the proper fashion, legally, so that the charges stick.
I've had to share this post on Instagram about how that could do more harm than good. And what I say is you could be tying up resources that help victims. And when I talk with law enforcement, first of all, there are rules. There's chains of evidence. There's law enforcement involvement. So sometimes people will say, hey, I pretended to be a teenager online. Here's the username. Go after him. Here's a screen grab. And I really can't do much with that. And law enforcement has to get involved with that. So when they do that and they pretend to be a kid and they get something in response, kicking it over to law enforcement is also problematic because they haven't gone through the proper channels. They haven't taken the proper evidence. So the result, as one detective says, is that it's just putting piles of garbage in front of law enforcement randomly. He used an alternate word. So essentially, it's tying up law enforcement resources when they're already incredibly under-resourced. So if people want to help, they can help by spreading awareness. They can help by, mentoring youth. They can help by donating to nonprofits that fight this. But pretending to be a kid online is just, there are so many ways that can go sideways.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Shawshank Redemption?
I have.
You, in a way, remind me, and let me get it out, like Andy Dufresne at the end of the movie when he has to crawl through the 100-foot tunnel of shit.
Yes.
Just to get some redemption at the end. Can you share something like something good, like how you felt, something redemptive that made this all worthwhile? You know what I mean?
Well, so in episode 2, there's at some point where I start crying.
Yeah.
Because I had to just watch something really, really awful. And, once in a while I crack a tear, but this part really got me. And it was really because, and I know when you don't necessarily see what's happening on the other side, but, you could gather that he was self-gratifying and you could gather that he was being really coercive and really just manipulative. And I cried and it was really upsetting. But then not much later, an arrest was made. And while I don't celebrate an arrest, I don't, crack open a bottle of gin and, cheers it up. There is some satisfaction in knowing that regardless of what happens right now, he does not have access to a phone. He does not have access to the internet and he cannot access children. And so anyone that was going to be a victim no longer is. Right. And so that's like the light at the end of the tunnel. And I will give you probably a really bad analogy, and I need to come up with another one, and I might steal the Shawshank one.
There you go.
But let's say, Brian, you're walking by a burning building and there are a bunch of kids inside, and you're told that you can go in there and grab a bunch of kids and take them out, but you're probably going to walk out with some 2nd and 3rd degree burns. You're going to say yes. You're going to okay, a 2nd degree burn, a 3rd degree burn. What is that? A cool scar. I'll get a tattoo over it. I'll go to the hospital. It'll be fine. And look at all of these kids that will not have that kind of long lasting damage. I can handle that because I'm an adult. So you do that thing, right? And so I think that's what I try to look at it as. It kind of sucks. There's a bunch of stuff that happens that isn't great. I have to really be intentional about self-care. Otherwise, I go to a dark place. But when I think about the score, when I think about teenagers and how wonderful and precious and just fun-loving they are and how they have their entire lives ahead of them, I think we all would do that.
Absolutely. I've had a great conversation a great time having this conversation with you. And I have a lot of respect for you because you are doing this work that is not, Brian, she's on TV. Right. But it's not glamorous work to get, you know what I mean? It's not, you're dealing with just the lowest of the low of society and trying to stop this scourge through technology that's in our kids' pockets every day. And you show such strength and on the show, and you also show not weakness, but your, these things weigh heavy on you, and it's very apparent. Especially like I was watching episode, I think it was 4 or 5. I just like, man, she's really taken a lot on doing this. So I hope nothing but the best for you, and I want you to keep working hard and doing this, because it's important work, and it's a television show. But this, like you said, it started long before the camera started rolling. So my very best to you, and just keep up the good work and everything that you're doing with your nonprofit. And what can people do if they're listening to this, or if they're watching your show and they're motivated to help your nonprofit? What can they do? I know it's SOSA. Can you talk a little bit about your organization online and what people can do to help?
Sure. So if you visit us, our website is sosatogether.org. And on social, we're SOSA Together everywhere. And obviously, what helps most, donations help keep us running. If you like to fundraise or shake down your friends for support too, that would be great. But as always, word of mouth is really important, not just for SOSA and for SOSA being an organization and being able to function, but also just word of mouth about online predation. We have this initiative we're launching, and it's just called Stop Victim Blaming. It's really important to us because I do think that victim blaming is one of the things that keeps perpetrators safe, because, we tend to shame a kid for posting a picture of herself like on Instagram, or, she's at the beach having fun with her friends. And I say constantly to teens, not your fault, not your fault. Abuse is never your fault. It's always the perpetrator's fault. So just, I think maybe keeping that in mind as well, that every time we victim blame a kid, that is giving a perpetrator some semblance of protection.
Sure.
But yes, please feel free to follow us. We love your support, whether it's, just following us on Instagram or Twitter, or you becoming a monthly partner with us and, sponsoring us monthly. I'm also on the internet as well, at Roo_Powell. And thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for your support and your kind words. Thank you and your wife for watching. That really means a lot too. So I hope that you all watch. And I hate to say enjoy, because it's not a show you necessarily enjoy. And I always want to kind of apologize to everyone when they say they watched it. But I hope that people find value in it. And entertainment in it, but also value in it.
Well, it's compelling television. And I know what you mean about enjoying the show. My last guest, the episode that's current right now, is with Dr. Catherine Ramsland, and she just did a whole documentary about the BTK killer. And so it's hard to say, wow, I really enjoyed your show. But no, yeah. But it's I appreciate the hard work. You're absolutely the best person for this line of work and to handle these guys. I just really think so highly of you, and my very, very best to you. I hope you take care of yourself. I hope you get those bad guys, for Pete's sake.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Well, there we are, everybody. Episode 219 of Necronomicast, featuring Roo Powell and her work on Underage Undercover. Getting the job done that needs to get done. Yikes. If you haven't watched the show yet, by all means, stop this podcast and run, don't walk to your television set and turn on Underage Undercover on now. Coming up on the Necronomicast, we got some true crime episodes coming up. I don't want to give too much away, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Heil Sound, heilsound.com, started by the great Bob Heil in 1966. Anyway, we're endorsing each other, I guess you could say, with their Heil PR40 microphone, which I am speaking to right now. Great stuff, great company. That's about it, everybody. I hope you have a great day, a great evening, a great week, a happy life. Necronomicast. Copyright 2022. All rights reserved. Recorded in the historic Haunted Heartland, Omaha, Nebraska.